we are here tonight doing a live stream, just Q&A. So any questions that you have on retirement planning topics, whether we're talking, it can be any questions that you have. So Social Security questions, it could be tax related, retirement accounts, investment, and whatever questions you might have, we are here to do the best we can to answer. Now, anything that I say here, please, as a disclaimer, this is educational in nature. Don't take anything I say as investment advice, tax advice, or legal advice. That can never be given to a general audience, right, through a video. But let's see. Feel free to please just type in any question that you have, and we can just have a conversation. While we do that, I want to introduce you here to some of my camera crew staff. So just real quick, Michelle, say hello. So if you have any, complaints, complain to her. And this is Corey. Corey is our cameraman. So they're kind of behind the scenes. And this was our very first live stream, like I said. So I've got one question. See, the first question here, I guess we'll take is, it says, I think I understand RMDs and how they are calculated, but could you give us a little more, clarification? Yeah, so that's a great question. RMDs, first off, is an acronym for required minimum distributions. And once you reach a certain age, based on your date of birth, you are required to take withdrawals out of qualified accounts. So that's out of retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, whatever you may have. So it's pretty simple calculating RMDs, but there are a lot of little rules to be aware of because there are penalties. And the penalty for not taking a required distribution is 25%. That's an excise tax. And if you make the correction and report it and say, hey, sorry, I missed that, but I've now taken that RMD, they will reduce the penalty from 25% to 10. So in your very best case scenario, if you miss an RMD, you're going to be paying at least 10% as a penalty. So definitely an expensive thing that you don't ever want to experience. So how do you calculate RMDs? You take your account balance as of December 31st of the prior year. Now, if you have multiple accounts, then you're going to have to do this with each account. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the basic idea is you take the December 31st ending balance, and then you look up, based on your age. The IRS has a form. And I've got several tax forms here. So it's called the Uniform Lifetime Table. Is for most people when you're living. And then it's for everyone for their living, but it's for your IRA or your 401k, so forth, that would apply to the Uniform Lifetime Table. And so if you have inherited a retirement account that has RMDs, then it's a different table. So it's a table for inherited IRAs. So you just want to know that there are different tables that you use. So if you've got your balance from your statement from December 31st, based on your age, you find the factor on this table, and you divide the balance by the factor, and that gives you exactly what dollar amount is your required minimum distribution. Okay, so it's fairly simple once you've got the table and you know the factor and how to make that calculation. But there are a lot of things that can go wrong, right? So for example, if you have an IRA, and let's say you're married and your spouse has an IRA, you might take the total combined balance. You might think that you can do that, but you can't, because each IRA has to have its own distribution. Even though you're married filing jointly, you may think, well, we're going to withdraw the total amount that's necessary, and we're going to pay the total tax necessary. So logically, you might think that makes sense. But the IRS is not always logical. They want you to physically take a withdrawal out of each IRA. You cannot aggregate IRAs between husband and wife. Now, you can aggregate if you have multiple IRAs, doesn't matter if you have multiple IRAs and multiple financial institutions, maybe more necessary, it creates more management issues. But if you do that, you can aggregate all of your IRAs. So you could take the total combined balance, and then you could take the required distribution out of just one. Because the IRS, they don't care how many separate IRA accounts you have. From their standpoint, you've only got one. But the spouse is totally separate, right? And then the other things you have to be aware of is, let's say you have an IRA and you have a 401k still with money. Both of those have to have their own required minimum distribution. You cannot aggregate those, even though it's for you. So you can aggregate IRAs, but if you've got a 401k or a 403b, because they're different, you can't aggregate them. You've got to pull the RMD out of each one. Okay? So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. We are going to start collecting Social Security in July. Let's see, this thing's moving faster than I can see. How accurate are the benefit calculators on the Social Security website? Well, yeah, that's a good question. I would not I think the calculator on the website gives you an idea, gives you a good idea. But when it comes to Social Security decisions, it's so important that you don't kind of look at Social Security with blinders on, meaning you're thinking only about that Social Security, that benefit, and all your other financial issues, your taxes, your other sources of income are kind of separate issues. You don't want to treat everything individually like that. That's where you're going to save more money. You're going to get more money in the long run when you comprehensively, holistically plan. And so while the website can calculate and show you some numbers, the question is, there's so many other questions that thing's not going to take into account, right? So as far as what's the best time to start Social Security benefits, it's really independent on what's going on in your life. Because if you're still working, there's an earnings limit. And so that means they're going to withhold some of your money. You're going to be going along and you're going to get used to this Social Security benefit hitting your account. Then one day it stops. And you're going to get a letter. They're going to say, if you're wondering why it stopped, it's because you've surpassed the earnings limit. And so now you have some period of time, could be a long time, depending on how much you're earning above the limit. So if you're still working and you're claiming early, there's issues with that. What is your tax strategy? If you've done a good job, you've got retirement assets, and what are the tax implications? Where is your income coming from, and what are the taxes going to be, and how and when does Social Security kick in? And it's really, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos, it really depends on your situation. The truth is, for some people, if you've got assets, you're ready to retire, let's say around 62, 63, and you're truly going to retire, meaning you're not going to keep working, and so you're not going to have that earnings limit issue, then it can make a lot of sense actually to start early, because it gives you more of a time horizon on your other assets. So there's an opportunity cost that comes into play. But your risk tolerance comes into play. There's so many things you just want to take into account. So I hope I kind of answered that. Let's see. I love the Financial Fast Lane. Thank you. And I love you. Heidi Jane. Let's see. Can I collect spousal Social Security benefits and later collect my own benefits? Yes. If your spouse has to claim their benefits before you can claim a spousal benefit, you are going to, it depends on what your own benefit is. If your own benefit is larger than the spousal benefit, there's really not a spousal benefit, right? Your own benefit is larger. So it kind of depends. There used to be some strategies where we would do that all the time. It's called file and suspend, where you could have a spouse that's not ready to claim, file, they would then turn right around and suspend their benefits, and it enabled the spouse to claim a spousal benefit while not claiming their own benefit. That was phased out back in 2015, so that's really not a thing anymore. Let's see. Oh, DSTs. the question about DST. So a DST is an acronym for a Delaware Statutory Trust. So let's see, what is the question? Anything I can say about Delaware Statutory Trust? Yeah, so a Delaware Statutory Trust is it has to do with real estate and it has to do with investment properties. So if you have your primary residence and you have lived there for several years, you've got appreciation in the value, there's an exemption, right? It's $250,000 plus another $250,000 if you're married. So you can have $500,000 worth of gains, and there's no tax on those gains. But that only applies to your primary residence. Okay, so now if you have other real estate, whether we're talking commercial real estate, investment properties, whatever it is, the tax treatment is different. And so if you have multiple, let's say, I know a lot of people who have multiple rental properties, and that's where most of their money is, most of their assets for retirement is kind of in these rental properties. And then they get to retirement, and a lot of times they're kind of tired of being a landlord in many cases. And they have some income, but it's a little unpredictable. And it's kind of like, well, how do I retire in this situation? And, there's going to be some upcoming maintenance on these properties, and there's going to be expenses. And, there's some things you have to deal with when you're a real estate investor, right? So a 1031 is an exchange in the IRS code that allows you to sell an investment property and roll the money over into a new property without any capital gains, no taxes being realized. And that's done all the time. But that still means if you want to sell property, the only way to avoid the capital gains is to defer it into a new property. Well, that didn't really help you get the end goal, right? So Delaware Statutory Trust allows you to sell property and roll it into securitized real estate. It's some building or some apartment building or whatever it is. You avoid all the capital gains tax and the depreciation recapture that goes along with that. Because when you hold a property for a lot of years, you're taking depreciation. You sell it, you've got the capital gains. They claw back or recapture some of that depreciation, and it's pretty stiff, right? If you've got a lot of appreciation in a property, a lot of times people say, "Well, I think I want to sell in my properties for as we go into retirement," and then they look at the tax implications and they're like, "Whoa, let's rethink that," because there's a lot of money in many cases that would be lost to taxes. So the Delaware Statutory Trust is a way to sell a property, avoid the tax, you do a 1031, and now you are in a high quality real estate property, but it's just paying you income. You have no management responsibilities. And then after the longest duration on those are 10 years, you can then sell, or when that property sells, and it will sell eventually, typically somewhere between year 6 and year 10, they're going to sell. And you're going to be faced with the same situation. So what a lot of people do is they just do another 1031 into another DST, into another property. And you can just completely avoid all of the capital gains. You're taking income off. And then at death, your beneficiaries get a step up in basis, no tax. So it's a powerful tax strategy for people who have a lot of real estate. So I hope that answered that. Let's see. A Delaware Statutory Trust, you do have to have an investment advisor to help you. It is a security. You can't just go to your realtor and say, "Hey, I want to do a Delaware Statutory Trust." They have to be a registered investment advisor, which is what we do, of course. Let's see. Heidi from South Carolina. Lane has great. Should I say that? Lane has the most handsome YouTuber there is. Seriously? Okay. Well, whoever you are, Heidi, I like you. Thank you very much. I'll let my wife know, and she'll make her jealous. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, doing the live, YouTube lives. This is new territory for me. I'm not used to this stuff. What are the biggest financial challenges people face in retirement? Retirement is typically over how many years, right? 20 years, 25, 30 years. depending on when you retire and your life expectancy. And so it's really you're unemployed essentially for 30 years. And so if you're going to be unemployed, where's your income coming from for all those years? And that's retirement income planning. And so, well, how much are you going to need? How much are you going to spend? What kind of lifestyle do you have? What about health insurance and all the things that go into this? So there's a lot of issues, and it depends on, of course, on how much have you saved. If you haven't saved any, well, there's going to be some very specific strategies or advice we'd give. If you have saved a modest amount, you have to kind of take an inventory and see what you've got to deal with. Sometimes people have a house with equity in it and very, very little savings. There are some strategies around that. So if they're going to have Social Security, you've got some equity in a house, you can improve your situation. We talk about the HECM reverse mortgage. A lot of times people will hear the word reverse mortgage and they automatically think, oh, that's a terrible thing. In my book, I talk about reverse mortgages. For some people, they are a game changer. For a lot of people. And so you just have to know, you don't want to use outdated thinking or assume you know the answers to some of these complex issues. We have seen many cases where people who had no idea or concept that they would even consider a reverse mortgage, but they were stressed and they had issues. And then once that reverse mortgage was brought into the mix, it completely changed their whole retirement outlook. Don't assume you kind of know the answers around reverse mortgages because they're complex. The laws have changed a lot over the years. They're backed by the federal government. They're non-recourse loans. There's all kinds of strategies. We have people who will come in that have done a great job in saving. They've got a nice nest egg, but it's mostly all tax deferred, right? They really were contributing on a consistent basis into their 401ks, and they've got this huge tax liability, and they really want to have a Roth conversion strategy, but they're not too excited about paying the taxes on those conversions, right? Well, we've seen where people who are in really good financial position, they'll actually use reverse mortgage, and they'll use that to pay the taxes on conversions, and they get their money into a tax-free environment, and then they have all tax-free growth going forward. There's that. There's just the ability. Sometimes people are saying, well, we could retire if we didn't have this mortgage payment. We still have 10 years left on the mortgage. Well, you can, assuming you've got enough equity in the house and based on your age, you've got to be at least 62, you could potentially just turn off the mortgage payment forever, guaranteed. And you can just, all of a sudden, you don't have a mortgage payment anymore, where before you were staring at, 10 years, 15 years more of mortgage payments. And so there's two parts to, financial planning. There's how much you're going to spend. I mean, there's how much you have as far as the savings, and people are always focused on, well, how much am I saving? How much is my money growing? But the other end of that is how much do you need to spend? What's your lifestyle going to be? And so as long as you can manage that and you can create a scenario where it works, you have the income to cover your bases. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Let's see, if I collect spouse benefits at 62 and collect my own benefits at 67-year-olds, do I get 100% or deduct at 70? I mentioned that, I think, earlier here. You can't get just your spousal benefits and then later turn on your regular benefits unless you have a survivor's benefit. Okay, so if you have a spouse that has passed away, you could get that spousal survivor's benefit and not turn on your own benefit if you have one, and allow your own benefit to delay all the way to 70. So it's larger. And if it's larger than the survivor benefit, then you could switch and take the larger benefit. See, what are the biggest financial challenges people face? I think we talked a little bit about that. It's so different for everyone. Some people are super aggressive always wanting the highest rate of return. And, just understanding market risk, understanding diversification is very important because, when you're younger and you've got time, you can take a lot more risk because you've got time. But when you get close to retirement and you're in retirement, your risk tolerance is different. It should be different because of sequence of returns risk. You have additional risks, an additional problem with volatility. So you've got to level out the volatility in the distribution years, and it's critical. Sequence of returns risk is something that I think gets overlooked, and it can devastate. If you were to retire, we run scenarios showing someone with a kind of a typical withdrawal strategy with their income, and we show them retiring. If they retired in the year 2000, their income runs out in 13 years because we had the .com, we had the 2000, the 9/11 terror attacks where the market was down 50%, kind of started to come back, and then we had the 2008 mortgage crisis. Anyway, so there's some significant volatility in the year 2000, right? And because they were taking income during that time, during that volatility, a portfolio that would have lasted 30 years had they had a different strategy ran out in 13 years. And it really is that dramatic based on the strategies you have in place and understanding sequence returns risk and market risk. So that is one that is, I think, a big one. How does Medicare fit into retirement plan? Well, you become eligible for Medicare at age 65. And so a lot of times we have people, where they're ready to retire earlier than that. And if you want to retire in 62 or whatever, you've got a few years before you're 65. So if you don't have, if you're going to retire and your employer insurance goes away, you've got some years where you would have to buy private insurance, which is not cheap, right? I mean, it's in the ballpark of $1,000 a month per person. So a couple $1,000 per month for health insurance for a few years. So that can be a deterrent. That can be a reason why people wait till 65. There's a lot of times people are like, we would retire if it was for healthcare, but we're going to go ahead and work a couple more years, get to 65. We see that all the time. When you get to, as far as Medicare goes, you don't have to claim it if you're still working and you still have employer benefits. Most people will claim Part A hospitalization. There's no cost to that. And then when you actually retire, then you get Part B. And then we always recommend a gap policy, because when you have original Medicare, there are gaps in the coverage for sure. So that's where you want to get a good Medicare gap policy. When you have a Medigap and original Medicare, it's really very strong coverage. I mean, it's very good health insurance coverage. Let's see here. Okay, there's all kinds of questions. I'm sure I'm not going to get to all these here, but let me see if I can find what's maybe most interest to you. I turned 65 in October. The Medicare advised me since December. How should someone balance liquidity needs with long-term investment growth and retirement? Yeah. Okay. So there's a good question. How do you balance liquidity needs with long-term investment strategies? Because when you have long-term investment strategies, you typically don't have as much liquidity, right? So yeah, that's just part of a good plan. You just have to have the right amount allocated. The question is, well, how much liquidity is needed? What's the right amount of liquidity? And then that money is going to be not at great risk at all, right? We want the money growing. Your money always has to be growing. So you have a conservative part of your money, and you have a more growth oriented. Key thing with investments is diversification, and not just the diversification you're probably accustomed to. If all you're investing in are public securities, they're very highly correlated with each other. That is not the definition of diversification. A lot of times people feel like, oh, well, I have a whole bunch of stocks or mutual funds, and so therefore I must be well diversified. No, not really. They're correlated. So you need different types of asset classes where kind of regardless of what happens, you're really stable because you're well diversified. So there's a lot we could talk about with that. Other questions that are of interest. Let me just a couple of facts here. Social Security. What is the average Social Security benefit? For men, the average is $2,106. For women, it is $1,714. Those are the averages. Now, of course, there's many people who have less than that, and there's a lot of people who have more than that. The maximum, it says the maximum monthly retirement benefit, what's the most you can have? At full retirement age is $4,018, but that does not include deferred the delayed retirement credits that you get if you defer. And so we see some really large, a lot of times, I guess the advantage I have is I see so many different people, their finances, and, from all different backgrounds. But it's not uncommon, especially if you have a husband and wife that both have long careers, their Social Security benefits are $70,000, $80,000 a year just from Social Security because they both have strong benefits. One issue that, is interesting, we talk a lot about, in the past, we've talked a lot about taxation on Social Security benefits. And most people who have done a good job in saving, if you've got qualified retirement accounts, it basically guarantees your Social Security benefits will be taxed up to 85% as ordinary income. And there are definitely, with planning, ways to avoid that altogether. Now, I know that that's one of current administration's goals or promises is to try to remove that tax. That's yet to be seen if that'll happen or not. But minimizing taxes, especially when you're talking about retirement assets over time, is if you can just save, even if you save a little bit, with opportunity costs associated with that, it becomes significant over time. And there's a lot of money to be saved in good tax planning. We call it proactive tax planning. And it's just getting things positioned because the tax code has all kinds of incentives, right? It's very thick. There's more words in our tax code than the Bible. It's a lot of words. And what are all those words saying? There's a lot of incentives. You can get a better rate if you do this, this or this or this. If this conditions are met, then there's an exception. And so it's kind of understanding how to take advantage of the tax code to minimize taxes. And when you do that with retirement accounts, it really is a substantial thing over time. So that's something that we do a lot of. Let's see, how have we been going here? Been going for a while. So I hope I'm not boring you to death. And we're kind of bouncing around here. I would like to know if we should do more of these live streams. My new book is just about available for pre-order on Amazon. It's probably 2-3 days and it'll be there. We're just waiting for that final process to finish. It's available on February 25th. It's an updated version of the Holistic Retirement Planning Revolution. This one is called the 5W Retirement Blueprint. And it's all up to date. And I really believe reading it, you will learn things that will benefit you. And I think it's, we've consulted with a lot of people over a lot of years. We look at all the different types of investment options out there and all the biases that are surrounding them. We talk about red tools, green tools in the book, and getting the right combination and getting a solid plan. Me and my team, we love to do financial planning. We service the whole country, all 50 states. We're located here in Arizona. Tempe office. We have a Tucson office. We have an office in California. And then we have clients all around the country that we meet with via Zoom. And got just a wonderful staff here. And we just love to serve people, help people. Financial matters is, it's critical. It's vital. And if you can avoid losing money unnecessarily through some good planning, it's there's a lot to be said for good planning. And anyway, someone says, please do more of these. Okay, at least I got one of you saying that. No, 2 of you or 3 of you. Okay, thank you. How should high net worth individuals approach self-insuring healthcare needs, and how can they be mitigated? I guess so I don't know if I said that very clearly. The question is, how should high net worth individuals approach self-insuring healthcare needs, and how can that be best mitigated? The risk mitigated. I guess the question would be is how high net worth we're talking about, right? Because that's just self-insure. I'm not sure why you would want or need to self-insure for healthcare, because you can, even if you do a high deductible type plan, you can get the cost down, and then any catastrophic healthcare expenses, you could have those insured. That's what we would suggest. When it comes to like long-term care planning, and we do a lot of that, helping people to plan for the long-term care expenses. Sometimes higher net worth people, sometimes they will self-insure, but there are tax advantages. So if you've got some money that you're planning to self-insure on, my question would be, well, what are the tax advantages of those funds? Because you could put some of that into an asset-based tool that gives you tax-free benefits for long-term care. So I would just say you need the whole plan, or you need to look at all the options. We do a lot of times. People say, well, what are your fees? How do you guys work? We offer a free consultation. We're just happy to get you on our calendar if you want to talk, answer any questions that you have, and we will do the planning. We will look at the details, and we will give you our advice. It doesn't mean you have to become a client, but we're willing. If you're serious and you want a real blueprint, that's what we do, is create financial blueprints. We can do that, and then after you receive that, you can just say, do you want help with implementing that or not? But there's no obligation, there's no cost, and we love to do that. So, we do have our Social Security analysis report. If you're just maybe interested in that, it's really worth that. If you just go to thefinancialfastlane.com, you'll find a link for Social Security. It's a very low cost, and you get a comprehensive Social Security report with your specific numbers. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I have heavy taxes on an apartment. I have no blueprint to help me. Yeah, you need some planning. Sounds like you need some planning. Okay, here's a question that we should address. Very frequently, we hear about Social Security benefits going away. I don't think it's going away. I mean, believe me, I know there's a shortfall, there's debt, there's deficits, there's all kinds of issues within our bureaucracy of the federal government. There's nothing that would be more politically unpopular than to allow that shortage to kick in with 2033 or whenever it is, and everyone's benefits are reduced. I just really believe they're going to resolve it because it's resolvable. And so I think it's to operate out of fears, think like, oh, sometimes people say, well, I'm going to claim as early as I can just because I'm afraid Social Security won't be there. So I want to get what I can while I can. I don't think that's good advice or a good idea. I can't predict the future, but both sides of the political aisle, no one wants to get rid of Social Security, even though you might think that. It's very, there are multiple ways to shore up Social Security. It's honestly the least of our problems. There's so many other problems. But if we can get a better hold of the budget and clean up some of the waste, in the budget. There's so much money that's wasted in a big bureaucracy. So hopefully there's going to be some big improvements in that area. All of that would strengthen Social Security. It would when we have a handle on our budget. We try not to get political on this channel. We look at what is the current law, what is the current situation, but we also like to keep abreast of what's changing, because things change a lot, right? We had the Social Security Fairness Act that just was passed right at the end of President Biden's administration. Just in the final days, he signed that bill, became law, and it repealed the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, which is basically a significant increase in benefits for about 3 million Americans. Policemen, firemen, school teachers, others that worked for the state or municipality or for the federal government that had a non-covered pension. And I have videos about that. But I have a question about, does my military pay affect my Social Security? Yeah, so as of right now, Social Security, the calculation for taxes on Social Security benefits is based on provisional income. So if your income's coming from the military, that doesn't really matter. It's still income, and it's going to be calculated, and it can cause taxation on Social Security benefits, if I answered your question right. Thank you, Steve, for the compliment. I really appreciate it. I love ideas. If you have specific topics that you'd like us to address, me and my team, I can bring on. I actually have some great guests coming up that we're going to have on the channel in the coming days, and to learn from them and to share that with you. So hope you'll subscribe and encourage others to. Appreciate you. I'm just grateful for my blessings. I have a wonderful family. I have wonderful employees, and life is good, and we love to help people. So I guess we'll sign off, and we'll look at this, and then we'll decide if we want to do these again. I don't know. Michelle, you got anything to say? Corey?
Great.
All right. I think it's time to go home. These guys want to go home and have dinner. So everybody, thank you. Till next time, have a great night.
A new edition of the Holistic Retirement Planning Revolution by Lane G. Martinsen. Lane Martinsen is back with an all-encompassing plan, a blueprint to guide you through the 5 W's of managing and preserving your wealth.